The handcuffs cut into my wrists as I knelt on my own front lawn at midnight, still wearing my grease-stained work clothes from the double shift at Morrison Logistics. Behind me, my wife Nora's laughter echoed through the darkness as she held her phone up, broadcasting my humiliation live on FaceTime. "Lance, you should see his face right now," she giggled into the screen. "He looks like a kicked dog." I'm Graham O'Neill, 43 years old, and I've been married to this woman for 18 years. Tonight, she called 911 and reported me as an intruder breaking into my own house. Why? Because she thought it would be funny to see me get arrested while her boyfriend Lance watched on video chat. Detective Alvarez stood over me, shaking his head. "Mrs. O'Neill, you understand filing a false police report is a crime?" Nora waved him off dismissively. "Oh, come on, it's just a prank. Graham's fine with it, aren't you, honey?" She flipped the camera toward my face again. "Say hi to Lance." The rage building in my chest felt like molten steel. For months, I'd suspected something was going on between Nora and Lance Pritcher from her salon. Late nights, secretive phone calls, new lingerie she never wore for me. But I'd pushed those thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid. "Ma'am, we need to talk about this down at the station," Alvarez said firmly. "Actually, Detective," I spoke up for the first time, my voice steady despite the fury burning inside me. "I'd like to press charges for filing a false report." Nora's smile faltered. "Graham, don't be dramatic. It's just a joke." 18 years of marriage," I said, looking directly at her phone camera where Lance was still watching. "And this is the punchline." The officer uncuffed me and helped me to my feet. My knees ached from kneeling on the cold concrete, but that pain was nothing compared to the humiliation coursing through my veins. As they led Nora toward the patrol car for questioning, she kept protesting that it was all harmless fun. I stood in my driveway, watching the red and blue lights disappear down Maple Street. Our neighbor, Mrs. Biggs, peered through her curtains, and I could already imagine tomorrow's gossip spreading through our small Ohio town like wildfire. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter Sophie, away at college. "Dad, Mom's FaceTime thing is all over social media. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine, sweetheart, don't worry about it." But I wasn't fine, not even close. The next morning, I sat across from Detective Alvarez at the police station, a cup of terrible coffee growing cold between us. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. "Your wife was released around 3 a.m., he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "But we're still investigating the false report. Body camera footage shows she was clearly aware you lived there." I nodded, studying the incident report. "Detective, I need to ask you something. How do I get copies of our phone records?" Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "Divorce lawyer?" "Among other things." He leaned back in his chair. "Graham, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen marriages implode in every way imaginable. But what your wife did last night, that's a special kind of cruel." "She's been having an affair," I said quietly. "With Lance Pritcher. He works at her salon." "You have proof?" "Not yet. But I will." Alvarez nodded slowly. "Just remember, revenge is a dish best served through proper legal channels. Don't do anything stupid." I shook his hand and left the station with copies of the incident report and body camera footage. The video was devastating. It clearly showed Nora laughing and joking while I was being arrested, even panning the camera to show Lance on her phone screen. My next stop was Hartley and Associates, the law firm my buddy Marty from the boxing gym had recommended. Jennifer Hartley was a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. O'Neill," she said after reviewing the footage, "this is one of the most clear-cut cases of marital misconduct I've seen. Your wife essentially created evidence of her own cruelty." "What are my options?" "Divorce, obviously, but also we can pursue charges for the false police report, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and potentially alienation of affection if we can prove the affair." I signed the retainer agreement and left her office with a plan. Step 1. Gather evidence. Step 2. Protect my assets. Step 3. Make sure Nora and Lance understood exactly what they'd unleashed. That afternoon, I drove to First National Bank and froze our joint accounts. 18 years of shared finances gone with a signature. The bank manager, Tom Rodriguez, had gone to high school with us. "Graham, I heard about last night," he said sympathetically. "Whole town's talking about it." "Then you understand why I need to protect myself." "Absolutely. Everything's frozen as of now. She won't be able to access anything without your signature." From there, I went to our cell phone provider. As the primary account holder, I had every right to request detailed call and text logs. The young clerk, barely out of high school, handed me 6 months' worth of records. "Sir, just so you know, there's been a lot of activity between your wife's number and—" He checked his screen. "A Lance Pritcher, like hundreds of calls and texts." "Thank you," I said, tucking the papers into my jacket. That's exactly what I needed to know. Back home, I spread the phone records across my kitchen table like a detective working a murder case. The pattern was undeniable. Late-night calls, dozens of texts during work hours, and a clear escalation over the past 4 months. Nora walked in around 6, still wearing her salon uniform. She looked tired and defensive. "Graham, we need to talk about last night." "Do we?" I didn't look up from the papers. She sat down across from me, finally noticing what I was reading. Her face went pale. "What are those?" "Phone records. Very interesting reading. Did you know you and Lance exchanged 47 text messages on Tuesday alone?" "Graham, I can explain." "Can you explain this one from last Thursday?" I read from the printout. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Graham's working late." Or how about this gem? "My husband's such a loser. You make me feel alive." Nora's hands shook as she reached for the papers. "Those are private." "Not anymore." I gathered up the records and stood. "I've filed for divorce, Nora. I've also pressed charges for the false police report. And I've frozen all our accounts." "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. And I have." She started crying then, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. "Graham, please, we can work this out. The thing with Lance, it doesn't mean anything." "It meant enough for you to humiliate me on camera for his entertainment." "That was just... I don't know why I did that. I was drunk and Lance dared me to..." "Lance dared you to destroy our marriage for his amusement?" I felt that familiar rage building again. "And you thought that was a good idea?" She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "Where am I supposed to go? This is my house, too." "Not anymore. I'm staying at Marty's tonight. Tomorrow you'll be served with divorce papers and a restraining order. I suggest you find somewhere else to live." "You bastard! You can't just throw me out." "Watch me." I packed a bag and drove to Marty's apartment across town. He was waiting with a beer and a sympathetic ear. "So, you're really doing this?" he said as we sat on his couch. "She destroyed 18 years of marriage for a laugh, Marty. There's no coming back from that." "What about Lance?" I smiled grimly. "Lance is going to learn that actions have consequences." The next evening, I waited in the parking lot outside Pritcher's apartment complex. He drove a flashy red Mustang that screamed midlife crisis, exactly what I'd expected from a 38-year-old salon worker who seduced married women. Lance emerged from his car carrying groceries, whistling some pop song. He was shorter than me, with carefully styled hair and the kind of fake tan that came from a bottle. When he saw me approaching, his cocky smile faltered. "Graham, right? Nora's husband?" "Ex-husband, thanks to you." He set down his groceries and held up his hands. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. What happened between Nora and me, it just happened. You know how it is." "Actually, I don't. See, I've never seduced someone else's wife, and then convinced her to have me arrested for laughs. Lance's face flushed red. That was her idea, not mine. I just thought it was funny when she suggested it. You thought it was funny? I stepped closer, using my 6-inch height advantage. You thought destroying my marriage was entertaining. Come on, Graham. Your marriage was already over. Nora told me you guys haven't been happy for years. Did she also tell you I've been working double shifts to pay for her salon courses? Or that I took out a second mortgage so she could start her own business someday? Lance shifted uncomfortably. Look, I'm sorry it went down like this, but nothing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his text to Nora. Can't wait to see that loser husband of yours get arrested. Make sure you get it on video. His face went white. Where did you get that? Phone records. All of them. Every dirty message, every plan you two made behind my back, every laugh you had at my expense. You can't just... I can, and I did. And now everyone's going to see exactly what kind of man you are. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth hanging open. But I wasn't done with Lance Pritcher, not by a long shot. The next morning, I made my first strategic move. I'd done some research and discovered that Lance was married, something he'd apparently forgotten to mention to Nora. His wife, Sarah, worked as a nurse at the local hospital. I found her during her lunch break, sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria. She was a pretty woman in her mid-30s, with tired eyes that suggested she'd been working long shifts. Sarah Pritcher? She looked up from her sandwich. Yes? My name is Graham O'Neill. I think we need to talk about our spouses. Her face immediately tightened. If this is about Lance and that woman from the salon, I already know. You know about the affair? I've suspected for months. Lance thinks he's clever, but he's not. She gestured for me to sit down. What I don't understand is why you're here talking to me instead of confronting him. I showed her the phone records and the body camera footage from my arrest. As she watched her husband laughing while I was handcuffed on my own lawn, her expression hardened. That snake, she whispered. Sarah, I'm not here to cause you pain, but I thought you deserved to know the truth. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across the table. Finally, she looked up at me with steel in her eyes. What do you want from me, Graham? I want Lance to face consequences for what he's done, and I think you want the same thing. She smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. Oh, Mr. O'Neill, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this conversation. Sarah Pritcher turned out to be a formidable ally. Over coffee the next day, she laid out everything she knew about her husband's pattern of infidelity. Nora isn't the first, she said, stirring sugar into her cup. There was a client from his personal training side business last year, and before that, a woman from his CrossFit gym. Why did you stay? Because I was building a case. I'm a nurse, Graham. I believe in being thorough. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. Financial records, hotel receipts, photos, text messages I copied from his phone. I've been preparing for this divorce for 2 years. I whistled low. You're more organized than my lawyer. I have to be. Lance thinks I'm just some naive wife who doesn't pay attention. But I see everything. We spent the next hour coordinating our strategies. Sarah would file for divorce and hit Lance with adultery charges, while I continued building my case against Nora. But we both agreed that legal action wasn't enough. Lance and Nora needed to face social consequences for their actions. The salon where they work, Sarah said thoughtfully. It's called Glamour and Grace, right? Very upscale, caters to the country club crowd? That's right. Nora's been working there for 3 years. And the owner is Sal Morrison. I know his wife, Patricia. She comes into the hospital for her chemotherapy treatments. I leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Patricia Morrison would be very interested to know that her husband's salon is being used as a hookup spot for adulterous employees. The pieces were falling into place. Sal Morrison owned the most prestigious salon in town, and his reputation meant everything to him. If word got out that his employees were conducting affairs on company time, using company resources, it would be a disaster for his business. "There's something else," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "Lance has been bragging to his gym buddies about his conquests. He even showed them the video of your arrest." The rage I'd been controlling for days flared hot in my chest. "He's been showing people?" "Half the guys at CrossFit Elite have seen it. They think it's hilarious." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to find out when Lance is planning to be at that gym again, and I need to know who else will be there." She smiled grimly. "Leave that to me." CrossFit Elite was exactly what I'd expected, all chrome and mirrors, with motivational posters covering every wall. The evening crowd was mostly young professionals trying to work off their desk jobs, along with a handful of serious athletes. I'd been a boxer for 20 years, training at Marty's old-school gym across town. These CrossFit guys thought they were tough, but they'd never taken a real punch in their lives. Lance was in the middle of his workout, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers. I recognized a few faces: Tom Bradley from the insurance office, Mike Stevens, who managed the sporting goods store, and Danny Walsh from the car dealership. All guys I'd known casually for years, all guys who'd apparently been entertained by my humiliation. I walked up to their group during a rest period. "Hey Lance, mind if I have a word?" He looked nervous, but tried to play it cool in front of his friends. "Sure, Graham. What's up?" "I hear you've been sharing some videos with the guys here." The group went quiet. Tom Bradley shifted uncomfortably, while Mike Stevens suddenly found his water bottle fascinating. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lance said, but his voice cracked slightly. "Really? Because I have it on good authority that you showed these gentlemen the footage of my arrest. You know, the one where you and my wife laughed while I was handcuffed on my own lawn?" Danny Walsh spoke up. "Graham, look, it wasn't like that." "Wasn't like what, Danny? Wasn't like you all had a good laugh at my expense? Wasn't like you thought it was hilarious that my marriage was destroyed for your entertainment?" "Come on, man," Mike said. "We didn't know the whole story." "The whole story?" I pulled out my phone and opened the body camera footage. "Here's the whole story. My wife of 18 years called the police and had me arrested as a prank while her boyfriend watched on video chat. And then that boyfriend shared the footage with his gym buddies for laughs." I held up the phone so they could all see the screen. The audio was clear. Nora's laughter, Lance's voice encouraging her, my own humiliation played out in high definition. The group watched in uncomfortable silence. When it ended, Tom Bradley was the first to speak. "Jesus, Lance, that's seriously messed up." "Yeah," Mike added. "That's not funny, that's just cruel." Lance's face was bright red. "Look, it wasn't my idea. Nora suggested it, and I just went along." "You went along with destroying an 18-year marriage for entertainment?" I interrupted. "And then you bragged about it to your friends." "Graham, I'm sorry, okay? It got out of hand." "Sorry doesn't fix anything, Lance. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation or the divorce or the fact that my daughter had to see her father arrested on social media." I stepped closer to him, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. "But you know what? I'm not here for an apology." "What do you want?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences, and your consequences are just getting started." I turned to address the group. "Gentlemen, I thought you should know that Lance here is married. His wife Sarah is a nurse at General Hospital. She's been working double shifts to support Lance's gym membership and personal training certification, while he's been screwing around with married women." The group exchanged uncomfortable glances. In a town this size, everyone knew everyone, and Sarah Pritcher had a good reputation. That's not your business," Lance stammered. "It became my business when you made my marriage your entertainment." I pulled out another set of documents. These are phone records showing 4 months of calls and texts between you and my wife, including several that were sent during your wife's work hours when she was probably saving lives while you were planning your next hookup. Danny Walsh shook his head in disgust. Dude, that's low even for you. There's more, I continued. Lance has been using the salon's back room for his encounters with Nora. That's right, they've been having closeness in Sal Morrison's business, after hours, using company property. Mike Stevens whistled low. Sal's going to lose his mind when he finds out. Oh, he already knows, I lied smoothly. I made sure of that. Lance's face went white. You told Sal? I told everyone who needed to know, Lance. Your wife, your boss at the personal training company, Sal Morrison, and now your gym buddies. Because that's what happens when you think other people's lives are your entertainment. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Lance, if I ever see that video anywhere again, or hear about you sharing it with anyone else, our next conversation won't be nearly as friendly. I left him standing there, surrounded by friends who were looking at him with new eyes. The drive home felt like the first victory in a war I was determined to win. Word travels fast in a small town, and by the next morning, the whole story was spreading like wildfire. Sarah had filed for divorce and moved out of their apartment, taking their joint savings account with her. Sal Morrison had fired both Nora and Lance after Patricia Morrison threatened to leave him if he didn't clean house. I was at Marty's gym, working the heavy bag, when he brought me the latest news. Nora's been calling everyone we know, he said, wrapping my hands, trying to get people to take her side. How's that working out for her? About as well as you'd expect. Most folks saw the body camera footage by now. Hard to spin that into you being the bad guy. I threw a combination at the bag, feeling the satisfying impact travel up my arms. What about Lance? Lost his personal training clients. Turns out married women don't want to work out with a guy who seduces other married women. Who knew? The gym door opened and Tom Bradley walked in. He looked uncomfortable, but determined. Graham, can I talk to you for a minute? I unwrapped my hands and followed him to a quiet corner. Tom had been one of the guys at CrossFit Elite, one of the ones who'd seen the video. I wanted to apologize, he said. What Lance showed us, the way he presented it. He made it sound like you and Nora were already getting divorced, like it was just a harmless prank between friends. And you believed that? I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting that what we were watching was someone's life being destroyed. He ran a hand through his hair. My wife found out I saw the video and didn't say anything. She's barely speaking to me. Good for her. Graham, is there anything I can do? Any way to make this right? I considered his question. Tom had always been decent to me, and he seemed genuinely remorseful. There might be something. Name it. Lance and Nora are going to try to rebuild their reputations. They're going to claim they were just two people who fell in love, that what happened to me was an unfortunate accident. I need people who know the truth to keep telling it. You want me to make sure people know what really happened. I want you to make sure people know who Lance Pritcher really is, and who Nora O'Neill really is. Tom nodded firmly. Consider it done. After he left, I called Jennifer Hartley for an update on the legal proceedings. Graham, I have good news and bad news, she said. The good news is that Nora's lawyer wants to settle quickly. The evidence against her is overwhelming and she knows it. The bad news is that she's claiming emotional distress and asking for alimony. Emotional distress? She's the one who had me arrested. I know, and we'll fight it. But she's claiming that your campaign of harassment has caused her to lose her job and her reputation. I laughed bitterly. My campaign of harassment? I told the truth about what she did. That's exactly what we'll argue in court. But Graham, I need to warn you. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Nora's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. She was right. That evening, I came home to find my house vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "liar" across my garage door and slashed my truck tires. The police took a report, but there were no witnesses and no security cameras. I knew it was Nora, but I couldn't prove it. Yet, the annual Founders' Day festival was the biggest event in our town's social calendar. Everyone attended: families, local businesses, politicians, and community leaders. It was the perfect stage for what I had planned. I'd spent weeks preparing, gathering every piece of evidence, coordinating with Sarah Pritcher, and making sure all the key players would be in attendance. Nora and Lance had been lying low since losing their jobs, but I knew they'd be at the festival. They couldn't resist the chance to try to rehabilitate their images. I arrived early and set up my booth near the main stage. Officially, I was representing Morrison Logistics with a display about our community involvement. Unofficially, I was positioning myself for maximum impact. Sarah found me around noon, looking nervous but determined. "Are you sure about this, Graham? Once we do this, there's no taking it back." "There's already no taking it back, Sarah. They made sure of that when they decided to make my life their entertainment." She nodded and handed me a USB drive. "Everything's on there. The hotel receipts, the credit card statements, the photos I took of Lance's phone, all of it." "And you're okay with this getting out?" "Graham, I've been humiliated for years while my husband cheated on me. At least this way, everyone will know the truth about who he really is." Around 2 o'clock, I spotted them. Nora and Lance were walking through the festival together, trying to look casual but clearly uncomfortable with the stares and whispers they were attracting. They'd both lost weight and looked haggard. The stress of the past month was showing. I waited until they were near the main stage, surrounded by the biggest crowd of the day, before I made my move. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the festival organizer. "I'd like to make a brief announcement about community safety." Mrs. Henderson, who'd known me for years, nodded readily. "Of course, Graham. Go right ahead." I took the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces looked back at me, including Nora and Lance, who had gone pale at the sight of me on stage. "Good afternoon, everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Graham O'Neill. I work at Morrison Logistics, and I've lived in this town for over 20 years. The crowd murmured agreement. I was a known quantity, a reliable guy who coached Little League and helped with community fundraisers. I'm up here today to talk about something that affects all of us: the importance of trust in our community. Trust between neighbors, trust between friends, and trust between spouses. I could see Nora in the crowd, shaking her head frantically and trying to push through the people around her. Lance had his phone out, probably trying to call someone for help. A few weeks ago, my trust was betrayed in the most public way possible. My wife of 18 years called the police and had me arrested on my own property as a prank, while her boyfriend watched on video chat. The crowd erupted in murmurs and gasps. Some people had heard the story, but many were learning the details for the first time. I want to show you all what betrayal looks like in our community. I nodded to Sarah, who was operating the festival's projection system. The body camera footage appeared on the large screen behind me, crystal clear and devastating. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Nora laughed while I was handcuffed, as Lance's voice encouraged her from the phone, as 18 years of marriage faded for their amusement. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. Then someone in the crowd started booing. Others joined in, and within seconds, the entire festival was erupting in outrage. "That's not all," I continued. "I want you to see what else your neighbors Lance Pritcher and Nora O'Neill have been doing in our community." The screen filled with evidence: hotel receipts, text messages, photos of them together while Lance was still married to Sarah. The crowd's anger intensified with each revelation. I could see Nora crying now, Lance trying to pull her away from the crowd. But there was nowhere to run. They were surrounded by hundreds of people who now knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. "This is what happens when people think other people's lives are entertainment," I said into the microphone. This is what happens when people think they can destroy families for fun. And this is what happens when people forget that actions have consequences. I set down the microphone and walked off the stage, leaving Nora and Lance to face the crowd's judgment. The booing followed them as they fled the festival, and I knew they'd never be able to show their faces in this town again. The aftermath of the festival was swift and decisive. By Monday morning, Lance and Nora had both left town. Lance moved back to his mother's house 3 counties away, while Nora went to stay with her sister in Florida. The divorce proceedings accelerated rapidly. Nora's lawyer advised her to settle quickly and quietly, taking whatever she could get. I kept the house, the truck, and most of our assets. Nora got her personal belongings and a small settlement that would help her start over somewhere else. The restraining order remained in place, and she was prohibited from contacting me or our daughter. Sophie came home from college for a long weekend, and we had the conversation I'd been dreading. "Dad, I saw the video," she said as we sat on the back porch. "I can't believe Mom did that to you." "Your mother made some very bad choices, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. How can you defend her after what she did?" I thought about that for a moment. I'm not defending her actions. What she did was cruel and unforgivable. But she's still your mother, and someday you might want to have a relationship with her again. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I'm proud of you, Dad, for standing up for yourself, for not letting them get away with it. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. What happens now?" "Now we move on. We build a better life without the people who thought our pain was entertainment." The legal consequences for Nora were minimal, a fine for filing a false police report and court costs. But the social consequences were devastating. Word of what she'd done spread beyond our town, following her to Florida and making it impossible for her to find work in her field. Lance faced similar problems. His personal training certification was revoked after multiple complaints, and his reputation in the fitness industry was destroyed. Sarah's divorce settlement left him with almost nothing, and his mother reportedly made his life miserable during his stay at her house. 6 months later, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She looked healthier and happier than I'd seen her in years. "Graham, how are you doing?" "Better every day. You?" "The same. I started dating someone new, a doctor from the hospital. He's nothing like Lance, thank God. I'm happy for you, Sarah. You deserve better." "We both do." She paused at the checkout line. "Do you ever regret what we did, the way we exposed them?" I thought about her question as I loaded my groceries into the truck. Did I regret it? Lance and Nora had thought they could destroy my life for their entertainment, humiliate me publicly, and face no consequences. They'd been wrong. The answer was simple: no regrets whatsoever. 1 year after the festival, I was a different man. I'd lost 30 pounds, gotten back into serious boxing training, and even started dating again. My house felt like home for the first time in years, without the constant tension and suspicion that had defined my marriage. Jennifer Martinez was a librarian who'd moved to town 6 months earlier. She was divorced, had 2 teenage kids, and understood the complexities of starting over in middle age. We'd been seeing each other for 3 months, taking things slow and building something real. "You know," she said one evening as we walked through downtown, "I heard about what happened with your ex-wife. People still talk about it sometimes. Does that bother you? Are you kidding? You stood up for yourself against people who tried to destroy you. That's exactly the kind of man I want to be with." We stopped at the corner where the festival had been held. The memory of that day still gave me satisfaction, not because I'd hurt Nora and Lance, but because I'd refused to be a victim. "Do you know what happened to them?" Jennifer asked. "Nora's working at a chain salon in Tampa. She tried to contact Sophie a few months ago, but Sophie wasn't interested. Lance is selling insurance in Columbus, living in a studio apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda. Do you feel bad for them?" I considered the question seriously. I feel bad that they made choices that destroyed their lives. But I don't feel guilty about exposing the truth. They thought they could humiliate me publicly and face no consequences. They were wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Dad, I got the internship at the marketing firm. Thanks for all your support." I smiled and showed Jennifer the message. "She's doing great. Dean's List last semester, internship lined up for the summer, and she's dating a nice kid from her psychology class. She's lucky to have you as a father. I'm lucky to have her as a daughter. She could have let what happened turn her bitter, but she chose to focus on building her own life instead." We walked past the salon where Nora used to work. It had been renovated and reopened under new management, with no trace of the drama that had once unfolded there. "Graham, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you think you'll ever trust someone completely again, after what Nora did to you?" I stopped walking and looked at her. Jennifer was everything Nora wasn't: honest, kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in building something together rather than tearing it down. "I'm learning to trust again," I said. "With the right person." She smiled and took my hand. "Good, because I'm learning the same thing." As we walked home together, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. A year ago, I'd been handcuffed on my own lawn while my wife laughed and her boyfriend watched for entertainment. Tonight, I was walking hand in hand with a woman who respected me, planning a future built on honesty and mutual support. Nora and Lance had thought they were so clever, so superior to the boring husband who worked double shifts and came home tired. They'd thought they could use me as entertainment, destroy my dignity for their amusement, and face no consequences. They'd learned the hard way that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They'd tried to destroy